Hi there, Veronique Berman from Ghana here. Real pleasure and very grateful to invite Rosalynd Gourgey to chat with me this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise with us. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell everyone what it is that you do?
Okay, well, thank you so much for inviting me today. As Veronique said, I'm Rosalynd Gourgey. I'm a registered dietitian. I currently work at the Royal London Hospital in Whitechapel, and I've now been a dietitian for 10 years, having requalified after my kids went to secondary school. Now, all registered dietitians only provide advice that's evidence-based, and we don't really talk about weird and wacky diets. Now, I've also had a long standing contact with Hannah, having worked as a volunteer in their offices and provided dietary advice to some of their clients.
Thank you. So you have a good idea of the things that we're concerned about, couples who are trying to conceive or who are having fertility challenges of various different types. So I hope you won't mind if I ask you a few questions, obviously related to diet, but specifically thinking about how you could explain the importance of healthy diet at the time of conception or while couples are thinking about conception.
Okay. Well, there's really strong evidence that having a healthy diet and healthy dietary patterns for both men and women have a beneficial effect on fertility. Now, one of the main reasons is that if you're either under or overweight, this can lead to more difficulty becoming pregnant. And a healthy weight can also lead to broader health benefits as well.
So even outside of that scenario, really, just generally?
Absolutely. So it's really important for everyone, but particularly for people trying to conceive.
And I really appreciate that you mentioned there, Rosalynd, that you're talking about both members of the couple, because obviously at Ghana we're very concerned about both members of the couple, that the impacts can be great on either. What would you, if you were asked to give top tips, what top tips would you give to achieve this? It's easy to say a healthy diet, but some top tips maybe.
Okay. So I've got 6 top tips. And they're really to achieving a healthy weight with a healthy diet. And as I said before, it can apply to anyone, whether they're trying to get pregnant or not. Now, 5 of these relate to diet, and the other is to levels of exercise. So the 5 related to diet are firstly ensuring lots of fruits and vegetables in your diet every day. We aim for 5. I mean, everyone knows this, but on average, it's normally about 2 that people are managing every day. And why is it important? Because they're full of vitamins, minerals, and fiber. And having, we talk about having the rainbow effect. I know at the moment we've got the rainbow.
It's quite appropriate, isn't it?
For the NHS, but having a rainbow of fruits and vegetables means we're getting all the full range of minerals and vitamins that we need. So that's number 1. Number 2 is making sure that starchy foods are a main element of our meal. So that's things like potatoes, bread, rice, pasta. Now that sounds strange, because people think of having starchy foods as being really quite heavy. But in fact, every gram of starchy foods is actually half the calories of a fatty food. So in fact, actually, that's the bad element of a diet. And trying to include whole grains or foods that take longer to digest, things like oats, things like whole grain sort of cereals. These are better for us. So having starchy foods in our diet, it should be a main part of our meal. Thirdly, having lean protein. So that's things like fish, egg, that's chicken. Then there's all the non-meat forms of protein, such as lentils, beans. This is also a very important part of our diet because it provides the building blocks for our muscles. and it gives us a lot of good sources of iron, which is also important. But if we are going to choose proteins, we should try to aim for the lower fat version. So even if you were to have a piece of red meat, we should aim to cut off the fat. We should aim.
Does that include eggs as well?
So eggs, again, if you were going to have eggs, it's most probably better to boil them or scramble them rather than have fried eggs and be adding fat. So I think it's all about reducing the fats, but eggs are good for you, but it's just what you do with them. You know, if you're adding cream to them in a hollandaise sauce, then that's not going to be very good for you. But if you're having some eggs, maybe scrambled eggs using low-fat milk on a piece of whole grain bread as a lunchtime meal, then together with some a nice salad, then that's a really good lunchtime meal. So the fourth thing that I want to talk about is something I've already alluded to, which is trying to keep oil and spreads to small quantities, because this is where you're going to start putting on a lot of weight. And also choosing the unsaturated oils such as olive oil, rapeseed oil, and low-fat spreads is also important. And also try to minimise things like cakes, biscuits, sweets, crisps. I don't really need to talk to you about that, but it's just things to try to keep those to a minimum. So oils and spreads to a minimum. And the fifth thing is dairy and dairy alternatives, because it's really important that we get enough calcium in our diet to ensure that our bones, and hopefully the bones of hopefully somebody when they become pregnant of the baby are strong, and that we have enough sources of calcium in our diet. And having the equivalent of 3 portions of calcium containing foods in our diet in the form of dairy or dairy alternatives is the other important thing.
So the dairy alternatives like the soya or the oat, they do still have the calcium?
Absolutely. Well, absolutely. If you buy the organic forms, then it doesn't have the calcium. But if you buy the regular form, then it has added calcium. And actually, it's something I just want to quickly mention, and that is that if you buy some of these dairy-free milks, and that is your main source of calcium, be careful to check they've got iodine added in, and that's also quite important if you're trying to become pregnant, to make sure you've got enough iodine in your diet. So there are some of the things like the soya, the Alpro soya, there's a couple of the oat milks now that have it added in, but as a general rule, the dairy-free ones actually don't have it. They have plenty of calcium, but they don't often have the added iodine.
Right, gosh, so that's a lot of very, very useful information.
A lot of information.
Yes, thank you. If I was asking you to condense it down to a very simple format, might you be able to do that, please?
Yeah, I think that's really what I'd like to do, because that is a lot of messages, and that was 5 of them, which were the diet form. I didn't mention the exercise, but maybe we'll get back to that. So this is my easy way of thinking of having a healthy diet, and it's thinking about the plate that you put the food on at supper time or lunchtime. So if you look at this plate, the green element is the vegetables. And the
Do you want to just raise it up a tiny bit? That's brilliant. Yeah.
Okay. So the green element is the fruit and vegetables. The red is our protein source, and the yellow is our starchy source. Now this is a plate which, if you put every night, you fill half of it with your fruits and vegetables, then you're going to be having it's not going to be a high calorie plate, because your fruits and vegetables have not got a lot of calories in it. It's this meat and fish and cheese, which particularly if you add oil to it, is more likely to. And that is what a plate looks like, where if you're trying to lose a little bit of weight, that's what you would want your plate to look like.
Right. And of course, you'd be able to get your 5 a day in.
You would get
quite easily with that
easily,
quantity.
particularly if you're doing that both lunch and dinner. And of course you can add a little bit of fruit to your cereal in the morning, which also helps.
That's great.
Help. So
that's great, and it's very visual, so it's quite easy to remember. Thank you. That's really helpful. Now, of course, we're all finding ourselves in quite an unusual situation, and this lockdown, it's, you know, with having to think differently about everything that we're doing. Any specific advice above what you've already mentioned that you might be able to add at this particular time?
Okay, so as you say, it's a very difficult time for everyone, and we're doing our best not to go outside more than we need to. So really what that means is we have to plan much more carefully ahead for what we're going to be eating for all of our meals, lunch included as well, because often we might have made ourselves a packed lunch, or we might have just gone out and got ourselves a sandwich, but that's not what we really want to be doing now if we want to stay safe. So I would say the number one thing is plan your meals for the week ahead. And by doing that, I mean actually coming up with your menu plan, and then looking at the ingredients that you're going to need, and write a list and see what it is you're going to have to order. Now, we're doing our best, so that's number one, is the plan. Number two is to actually make that list. Number three is then do your best to use online or delivery shopping as much as possible, so that you're able to reduce the number of times you go out. Now, I know it's difficult to get online shopping, but there are a lot of shops that if you're thinking well ahead and you don't leave it till Thursday, they will actually deliver for you. And that really will make a big difference. The other thing is also to think about what snacks you want to have around the house, because we always get hungry. And it's those times when we get hungry, when we think, I must just, what can I find? And you open your cupboards and you see the biscuits. And it's thinking ahead. What are those healthy snacks that you might like to have, and make sure you've got plenty of them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really good advice. Thank you. Things to avoid, you know, we're thinking about conception or during pregnancy. Are there things, you know, big red flags?
Yeah, so I suppose that they're not necessarily so dietary, but the main things are making sure you're not smoking, avoiding alcohol, because that leads to smaller babies, and also trying to limit the caffeine, the amount of caffeine we have in our diet. So those are just the three broad things that I would recommend not having in your lifestyle if you're trying to become pregnant.
Now, the flip side of sort of thinking about things to maybe add or to supplement, because obviously we've talked at length about a healthy diet, but are there any supplements or extras that you might recommend to be putting into an already healthy diet, maybe vitamins or minerals or other preparations?
Yes, well, there are three vitamins I'd just like to talk about, or vitamins and minerals. So the first is folic acid. This is something that anyone who's thinking of trying to conceive and during the first 12 weeks of pregnancy should be taking a supplement. So the usual amount is about 400 micrograms. Although that depends, but that is the general rule is a 400 micrograms supplement, as well. And
is that something, is that something that they can buy over the counter, or is that has to be prescribed?
You can buy that over the counter. Occasionally a GP might prescribe it, but you can get it in any chemist and most supermarkets that have like a pharmacy section. So that is something you can get very easily. And anyone who's thinking of conceiving should be taking that supplement, because it reduces the risk of the child having any problems such as spina bifida or things like that. So it's a really, really important supplement to take. Also, they should be eating foods that naturally contain folate, which are things such as green leafy vegetables, just to help supplement it. but we don't think we can get enough, definitely. So we advise taking this supplementation in addition to eating foods that contain folate. So that's number one. The second thing is vitamin D. At the moment, government advice is that actually we should all be taking vitamin D, particularly in the winter months. And also if we are, if we're sort of often going to be covered up, if we're not getting outside enough, if we're using sunscreen, because vitamin D helps us absorb the calcium and give us strong bones and strong teeth. And obviously, if you're becoming pregnant, then this is something that, your baby, please God, will, also be forming in the right way. And so having a vitamin D supplement is another recommendation. And this is 10 micrograms a day. And again, you can get this in any pharmacy. Or
that's really an across-the-board recommendation, isn't it? It's
across-the-board recommendation for everyone, for anyone. Yeah.
And of course, we're not getting, even if the sun is shining right now a little bit more, we're still not getting the benefit of that, even though the winter looks like it's over. So probably keep it up even if the weather's improved, because we're indoors.
Absolutely. At a time like this in particular, it should be recommended. And then the other one actually is a vitamin that you shouldn't be taking. The other two you should be taking, but vitamin A you shouldn't be taking. So if you're on a multivitamin, please check whether it contains vitamin A. And this sometimes is referred to as retinol. So this can cause birth defects, and therefore we get enough in our diet, and that's not a problem, but don't take a supplement containing vitamin A.
Right, but a dietary source is fine. It's just a supplement.
It's a supplement, yeah.
And of course, the iodine that you mentioned before is something that we should be adding, or?
It's the only time we need to add it is if we are on a dairy-free diet.
Right.
And if we're on a dairy-free diet, because a lot of people are nowadays for whatever reason, we need to check our dairy-free source does have iodine in it. Okay.
Brilliant. Right.
So that's quite important.
So a thought, if you could spare one, for the fact that for a lot of people, they can take the information on board and it's been hugely helpful. But there are times when maybe people need a bit of inspiration, some ideas of how to incorporate this very, very useful advice in everyday recipes or in sort of easy to use. As you said, you plan the menu, you do the shop, but then actually sometimes there's a bit of inspiration needed. Absolutely. Just to make it actually end up on the plate.
Yes. So there are a number of places that I usually look if I'm looking for ideas and for good information, because as I said at the beginning, there's good information, but there's a lot of information out there, but not all of it's good. So the British Dietetic Association website has a really good selection of fact sheets, has lots of information on healthy snacks, on weight loss fact sheets, general healthy eating. So that is a really good source. So that's the British Dietetic Association. Just type it into Google and you will find that open to the public. I also find that the NHS website, the NHS Live Well, Eat Well, also has a very good selection of ideas. And if I'm looking for recipes, I know my kids always put it into YouTube and they find out how to, they watch how to make whatever, but I like going to the BBC Good Food Recipes website, which does seem to have a very good selection of recipes, which at times like these can be very much needed.
Yeah, it's quite helpful to have actual visual ideas of how to translate the good advice into a tasty end product.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very, very much. A lot of information, but really, really helpful, and really grateful for your time and your expertise. Thank you so much, Rosalynd. Rosalynd Gourgey, dietitian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.